All right, welcome to my presentation on my activity analysis of riding a bike. I'm Christina Egbert. Let's go. All right, so as John F. Kennedy once said, nothing compares to the simple pleasures of riding a bicycle. Bicycles can be a very meaningful activity for many different people, but for this presentation, I'm going to focus on recreational cyclists. So someone like this guy right here, and not the rest of the pack. So riding a bike can can be meaningful because it allows for physical fitness. Someone can use riding a bike as a means for transportation, or it can be a method of social participation. So to ride a bike, the first step is to mount the bike. You grip the handlebars. I grip the handlebars with both hands, lean the bike towards the person standing towards you, and then swing your leg around the back of the bike. Then you straddle the top of the bike standing over it. Let's watch the video, and he's going to go ahead and do all of the steps. So the first step, he's standing by the bike, leaning it over, then swinging his leg around, and then standing over the top tube. So to start riding, the next step is to lift the pedal up with the top of the foot, and then step down onto that lifted pedal. You bring the pedal up into about so the crank arm is about parallel with the ground to have momentum, and then you place once you push it down, it gives you momentum to start riding, and at that time you place the opposite foot on the other pedal and begin pedaling, and then sit on the saddle. Let's see how he does it. All right, here he goes, lifting the pedal up. And he's going to go forward in a moment. And you don't start sitting on the saddle until you've already started pedaling, on a properly fitted bike, at least. There he goes, and then he sits down. And now he's going through the pedaling aspect of the bike where you alternate both legs. And then we're going to see him get off the bike right about here. So you lean it over the same way and then step off, just like this. So when he was holding onto the handlebars with one hand when he gets on and off, but you can hold on with both hands as well. All right, so in the body positions for riding a bike, you start with standing next to the bike and then standing single-legged, where you swinging your back leg over, and then transition from stepping up to sitting onto the bike. So you go from standing to sitting while riding a bicycle. All right, and then the important unique characteristics of riding a bike are timing and balance. So for timing, while pedaling timing is important so you can rhythmically alternate the pedal strokes, and timing is also key during takeoff because the rider must simultaneously start pedaling and lift their body up to the saddle at the same time. Balance is also an important aspect of riding a bike because there can be slight bumps in the road that may require shifting of the body to maintain balance, and also just leaning to the side and not even turning the handlebars can gradually shift the direction of the bike, and so it requires balance to be able to shift the direction and then come back up and ride straight again. All right, so the joints involved in riding a bike include the talocrural joint, so the ankle, and there's dorsi and plantar flexion, and this is for lifting up the pedal as well as when you're pressing down on the pedal to ride the bike. And so approximately 5 to 10 degrees of dorsiflexion are needed, but you could do it with the ankle at 90, so with 0 degrees of dorsiflexion as well, but it may cause some stiffness in the pedal stroke. And then plantar flexion Same thing where you the rider will plantar flex their foot to bring the pedal up, but that could be done in a 90-degree angle as well. So for riding the bike, knee flexion is at 105 degrees of range of motion. And then for the hip joint, the iliofemoral joint, there are 4 different movements happening. So flexion and extension. For flexion, it requires 90 degrees of range of motion. Extension requires 30. And the most extension is seen when we're doing that circumduction, take the leg all the way around over the bike. And that's also where there's abduction at 40 degrees and external rotation at 40 degrees. So, and also riding a bike is important to be able to look both ways and watch for obstacles. So that's why we have both neck rotation and flexion and extension. So for neck rotation happens at the atlantoaxial joint, and rotation should be at 60. And this is full range of motion for the neck, and that is important because when you're riding a bike, you can't compensate with the rest of your body, with your torso, because compensating with the rotation would then turn the bike, and you want to be able to look before you turn. And then also there's some small need to be able to extend and flex the neck at the atlanto-occipital joint. And so this flexion should be at about 10 to 15 degrees and extension at 10 degrees. And then the intervertebral joints, it is important to have some rotation and flexion of the torso, so that rotation's at 30 degrees and flexion is at 20. And this is, we see that flexion in the spine when you're reaching forward to the front of the handlebars. And then we also have extension of the wrist. Is when you're holding onto the handlebars, the wrists are extended up for the hybrid bike that we were talking about. And so with extension is at about 15 degrees, and then flexion is at neutral. And then for fingers, the MCP, PIP, and DIP all need to be about 60 in order to grip the handlebars. Then the thumb abducts to grip the handlebars with about 35 degrees of range of motion required, and then the IP joint of the thumb flexes as well with about 50 degrees required. So the primary muscles involved in this activity are the primary movements and muscles. So the first is knee flexion, and the agonists for knee flexion are the biceps femoris, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus. The antagonists are the rectus femoris, vastus medialis, and intermedius, and the synergists are gastrocnemius, gracilis, and sartorius. For knee extension, the agonists are rectus femoris, vastus lateralis, medialis, and intermedius, and the agonists are the biceps femoris, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus. And for this muscle, there are not, for knee extension, there's not synergists. And then for hip external rotation, the agonists are piriformis, external and internal obturator, inferior and superior gemellus, quadratus femoris, and gluteus maximus. And then the antagonists are gluteus medius, adductor magnus, and the synergists are gluteus medius, psoas major, iliacus, and sartorius, and biceps femoris. So additional muscles involved in riding a bike are hip flexion, hip extension, and hip abduction. So for flexion, the agonists are the iliopsoas, the rectus femoris, and pectineus. The antagonists are gluteus maximus, biceps femoris, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus. And the synergists are iliacus, tensor fasciae latae, and sartorius. For hip extension, the agonists are gluteus maximus, biceps femoris, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus, and the antagonists are the iliopsoas, rectus femoris, and pectineus, and the synergists are the adductor magnus. For hip abduction, the agonists are gluteus medius and gluteus minimus, and the antagonists are pectineus, gracilis, adductor longus, and brevis, and magnus. and the synergists are psoas, piriformis, tentor fasciolate, quadratus laborum, and rectus femoris. And then finally, for wrist extension, the agonists are extensor carpi radialis longus, extensor carpi radialis brevis, and extensor carpi ulnaris. And the antagonists are the flexor carpi radialis, flexor carpi ulnaris, and palmaris longus. And the synergists are extensor digitorum and extensor indicis. All right. So then the muscle contractions for riding a bike are let's start with circumduction. So for circumduction, there is circumduction. The circumduction is concentric contraction, and now the muscles involved in that are, or the actions, multiple movements are involved in circumduction. So with the swinging the leg outward, and then we see swinging the leg outward, we see hip extension, external rotation, and abduction. And these muscles are concentrically contracting. And then during this motion, the muscles in the standing leg are isometrically contracting. And then we also, when lifting the pedal up with the foot, the dorsiflexors eccentrically contract as the foot is plantar flexed to position it, and then concentrically contract when lifting the pedal. And then when lowering the foot during this process, there's the eccentric contraction of the dorsiflexors. So let's go ahead and watch a quick little clip of this action. The pedal came up, and then the rider pressed down on the pedal. All right, and then when the knee and hip extend to press the pedal down, the contraction is eccentric of the flexors. Oh, so now we're on the riding the bike, and so when like I just said, when the knee and hip extend, press down, the contraction is eccentric of the flexors, and then because this is with gravity. And then when flexing the knee and hip for the second half of the pedal stroke, the contraction is concentric of the flexors. And some bikes where we see the rider here, there is just a flat pedal, but other times cyclists will have a cage or a clip on their shoe and allows the movement of bringing their leg up to be more powerful. So, and then when flexing, then in the riding position with the arms extended forward, the neck extensors, shoulder flexors, elbow flexors, wrist extensors, and finger flexors isometrically contract. And then when reaching for the brake lever, the finger extensors concentrically contract when pulling the brakes tight. And then when pulling the brakes tight, the flexors concentrically contract. And then also when rotating the neck to look for traffic, the neck rotators concentrically retract. So let's go ahead and watch this last video. And you see the cyclist looking both ways, using this, and then pedaling. All right. So for adaptations for an individual with limited range of motion in the hips, there are a few different options. So depending on the level of limitation. For someone without the required range of motion to swing their leg around and over the back of the bike, a step-through bike can be used. This is a bike with a dropped down tube, so the rider can just step through to the other side and not have to swing their leg to the other side. Someone with greater impairments could benefit from using a recumbent bicycle. And this is what we see here in this picture. The cyclist is sitting in the bike and is able to be in a reclined position, and no hip extension is required. All right, thank you very much for watching my video, and enjoy this cyclist riding a tiny bike. Thank you very much.